Recognise so many people in the room. Feels like we're preaching to the converted, but we're going to extend the conversation. Thank you all for coming and being here. And for those people that are joining us online as well, we are being live streamed on YouTube, which is very exciting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Caroline Bowditch, and I have the privilege of being the cultural equity consultant currently with Melbourne Fringe Festival. And this is the fourth conversation in a series of conversations that I've been having over some months as part of the Radical Access program, which I'll tell you a bit more about in a little minute. Tonight's conversation is I decided not to mince my words. So it's, why are we so shit at access in Australia, and what are we going to do about it? It's nothing like stating the obvious, really, is there? So I thought I'd just cut to the chase. We've had other conversations previously about feedback called How Do We Tell Them They're Crap? The first one in the series was, does access really make for better performance? So I wasn't mincing my words in the putting together of this program. I've been working in collaboration with the fabulous Simon Abrahams, who constantly makes me braver and makes me ask bigger questions, which I greatly appreciate, which is so great. Tonight I am joined by three incredible arts leaders who you will meet. I'm sure they're all known to you. I have no doubt about that. So I'm going to be joined by Wendy Martin, Morwenna Collet and Fayen I will introduce them, or they'll introduce themselves in a little minute. But I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. We are on the traditional owners of the Eastern Kulin Nations, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and also acknowledge the neighbouring Boonwurrung and Bunurong people, and pay respects to elders past and present. And I've just come from doing a beautiful exercise over at VCA led by my lovely colleague Lauren Swain, who's in the audience, which was really asking us to do a drawing exercise, but was really about connecting us to being present to what's around us. So I want you to just take a moment now for yourself to just think about, on your journey here, what might you have noticed in terms of something that you saw, something you heard, something you smelt, that might be in the air, that might be about spring and the fact that we've just changed seasons. So just take a moment to just think about something that you noticed in the natural, beautiful world around you that has been preserved for millennia for us to share in. We were talking about wattle and the smell of wattle that's in the air that gives some people hay fever. Well, maybe it's not the wattle that gives hay fever, it's other things come in spring. But there's lots of there's definitely air smells different at the moment. We are in a disability-led and held space tonight. That means that we make the rules, and the rules are that the doors will remain open at all times. You can come and go as you please. We are here because we're hardcore for 90 minutes. So, and we all know in this room that we could talk about this till the cows came home. So 90 minutes isn't going to be hard in terms of conversation, but might be hard in terms of concentration or sitting still. So please feel free to take breaks as you need. Come and go, come back. And also there is a quiet space that is back towards the lift, and there will be front of house people who can direct you to the quiet space if you need it throughout tonight. But also, I'm being live televised. The whole thing is also being shown in the foyer. So if you would rather be in another space for a part or all of tonight's conversation, you're very welcome to be in that space as well. I am being joined by the fabulous Ilana and Jen, who are Auslan interpreters tonight, and we also have live captioning, which is very exciting given that we're in a world of automation and auto-generation, but we actually have real live people doing our captions. So thank you to our real live captioner, who tonight is Gail Kearney. So thanks, Gail, for being with us and captioning us in all the ways. What else do I want to tell you before we start? Let me tell you a bit about Radical Access, and I'm sure some of you will know about the Radical Access program. But basically, the Radical Access program, project, whatever we want to call it, imagines a radical version of best practice accessibility for the independent arts sector and moves the conversation beyond the provision of access or access services into a place of cultural equity, which is something for my disabled and allied colleagues in the room that often is something that is really hard to imagine. But sometimes we can conjure it enough to think, what would it be if there were no barriers for us engaging in the arts, either as makers or as audience, as facilitators, as practitioners, whatever it might be. That's what Radical Access is wanting to get to. It's really a provocation for change, and for any of you that know me, you know how much I love change. And it's a call for accelerated access, because we also know it can be glacial. So we want to give it a little shove up the bottom to move it on faster. That's why we're here. So in order to move us on and to really open the conversation, I would love to invite my fellow colleagues to introduce themselves before we launch into very tricky conversation. Not tricky, but it's going to be a robust conversation, believe you me. We've had a briefing session all together, and I was like, how long have we got for this conversation? Say a week? Maybe 4 months. But we're going to try and get as much into 90 minutes as we can. There will be a moment towards the end for you to also ask questions of us. Those people that are online, please add your questions to the comments under the YouTube link. And one of my colleagues, the fabulous Millie, I think is keeping an eye on them, and we'll feed them through to us in the space. So we'll get to questions at the end. Anyway, I keep dangling the carrot, don't I? Without further ado, I would love to invite Wendy Martin, Morwenna Collet, and Fayen to introduce themselves. And Wendy, I'm going to call on you first to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much. Caroline, I'm totally honoured to be invited to participate on this panel with you three amazing women. I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm calling in from Gadigal country and pay my respects to the traditional owners past and present, and honour their continuing connection to land and to culture. I'm a white woman with dark hair, dark eyes, a dark blue shirt, and old enough to have earned the privilege of having a seniors card. Behind me is, half of a beautiful artwork by a Torres Strait Islander artist, Susan Wanji, and it's actually a women's dance ceremony. Dance is something that I absolutely love, and when I saw that painting, compelled to have it in our life at home. So why am I here today? Well, in 2011, I moved from Sydney to London, and I took up the position of Head of Performance and Dance at the South Bank Centre in London. And week one on the job, I was given the extraordinary gift, I always say, of being asked to produce the Unlimited Festival, which, as it turned out, was the highlight, a great highlight of the London 2012 Paralympic Games. But that invitation terrified me in many ways, because I've never, prior to that, my experience in Australia had been once in the mid-80s seeing the incredible work of the UK dance company Canduco, and in the early 2000s seeing an incredible piece in Adelaide by Restless Dance Theatre with the phenomenal Dan Dorr, who I'm sure everyone will know, who blew me away. But given this invitation, what I really realized is there is so much I don't know, that I had so much to learn. And so I asked my boss, Jude Kelly, who was artistic director of the South Bank Centre at the time, if she would kind of call a town hall meeting and invite all the invite artists and arts leaders from the disability arts sector into South Bank to talk about how we were going to do this with them. And essentially at that meeting, I said to them, I don't even know what I don't know, and I would love to be able to have a series of meetings with many of you as possible, one-on-one, to understand what this festival is that you want and how it should be done and how you would like it to be. And I was then introduced to the extraordinary, to Caroline, to the amazing Jenny Searley, who was part of this program of conversations, the incredible Jo Verrant, who is still leading Unlimited, I guess 12 years later now. And I won't go on too much. It was an incredible festival. Morwenna was there. Caroline was one of the stars of it. But I suppose when I came back to Australia, I came back as artistic director of the Perth Festival, and one of the strongest commitments I made straight up was to bring everything that I learned in London from the Unlimited experience and put disability and incredible artists at the heart of the Perth Festival program across the 4 years of my tenure. And I'm sure across the course of this conversation, we'll have the opportunity to talk about some of the amazing artists and projects that came to the festival, and I believe still has left a legacy across the country with their presence, both with audiences and other artists and other arts programmers. That's me.
Thanks, Wendy. That's brilliant. Morwenna, I'm going to ask you next, just because you're next on our screen.
Thanks so much, Caroline and Wendy. What a great intro. So nice to be with you all tonight. I feel sad that I'm not in the room with you. I want to know who's there, but I bet there's lots of great people in the audience. For anyone that I haven't met before, my name's Morwenna Collet. My pronouns are she, her, and today I'm tuning in from beautiful Lutruwita, Tasmania. I'm on the lands of the Kunu Maluka people. And of course, Tasmania is one of those places that has a very complicated history with colonisation, dispossession and invasion. So very grateful to be on this incredible land tuning in with you today. In terms of a description of myself, I'm sitting in a hotel room wearing all black today with some love heart earrings and black glasses. I've got some light coming in from the windows. It's very nice to have some natural light in the room with me. And I'm a proud disabled woman and the carer of a neurodivergent little person. I am a musician originally, but disability kind of changed the course of my career. I was a classical musician 25 years ago and live with a particular impairment which affects my fine motor skills. So that sort of gave me my sojourn into arts management, and had a long career working for my sins with arts funding agencies, and for the last 5 years or so I've been running a consultancy practice just specialising in accessibility, diversity, equity and inclusion. Lots of big words, getting lots of kind of global attention and chit chat at the moment. And I mostly work with arts and culture organisations because we're the most fun, quite frankly. And this conversation tonight about are we shit and what are we going to, why and what are we going to do about it? I guess I've built a business in a way on the fact that we are a bit shit, but I think we're wanting to do better and are starting to do a lot better. And really excited to see where the conversation goes tonight. And looking forward to getting into it. So thank you. That's me. And I might flick over to Fayen.
Great.
Kia ora, greetings all, and yes, though we can't tell who is in the room, I did receive an alert from Instagram that Carly Finlay's just shared a photo of us all. So Carly, hi, it's great to know that you're there. And feel free to others, if you tag us, then we might know that you're there too. My name is Fayen DV, and I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I live just near the Birrarung, near the bat or flying fox colony. And in my Zoom picture, I have a magnolia tree from downstairs where I live at the former Kew Lunatic Asylum, which is really important in terms of a project that I'm working on right now. I have dressed up for the occasion, including a necklace by Debris Facility, in a great effort to overcome my current illness. So excuse me if my voice goes a little during this conversation. To give a very quick intro to me, I'm an artist, I'm an access advocate and a researcher, and I've worked for about the past decade in access-led and access-infused creative practice, mainly in contemporary art galleries and museums, but in other cultural settings as well, and mostly internationally, because as those of us who work in the space know, there's a lot of really great conversations going on with international collaborators. A lot of the privilege of the kinds of work that I do now has come to me through my life of fluctuating and degenerative vision and my various moments within blindness and approaching blindness. But I work more broadly than that, and I'm particularly interested in intersensory conversations between and among those of us who experience an abundance of perceptual variation. I had the privilege of being awarded the Fringe Radical Access Commission in 2023, and that was an experimental, disability-led choreographic extravaganza translating an episode of Star Trek through experimental movement languages that came from disability. It was presented at Chunky Move and it won a Green Room Award for Design and Technical Excellence. We were nominated for Outstanding Experimental and Contemporary Performance, and we won 2 Melbourne Fringe Awards for Sound and Technical Excellence and Innovation in Dance. And so it was an utterly thrilling opportunity, but also it was incredibly frustrating because of the numbers of barriers to access that I've faced and the exhausting fight to try and bring that into what I really wanted to be truly radical. And that has led to the co-founding of the Access Lab and Library, and hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about that a bit more tonight, but in a brief, it reflects a hope that access can be more widely embraced, it can be more ambitiously experimental, and that we can be more generous in sharing methods, tools, cases, and approaches with one another, so that beyond those of us who are really committed to and excited about this work more broadly across Australia, access can become something that people are excited about. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Fayen. There's claps in the room. The really interesting thing, this conversation was because it's the last conversation of the series, this was supposed to be the in-person one, but it's really fascinating to me that I've ended up in conversation with 3 people on a screen. So it's consistent with the whole series, but I feel very much all of your embraces with me in the room, even though you're on a screen. Thanks for those beautiful introductions. I'm sure you'll all agree with me that this is a star-studded lineup, so we're in for a good one, folks. I wanted to just start us off with a very simple question, just to begin, and that is, are we actually shit at access in Australia? And if so, Why do you think that? What makes a shit? But I just thought it was it was time to release the elephant into the room and just start where we mean to go on. So whoever wants to begin that? Fayen, I might ask you to start first because you are actively working, obviously, in this space. I also really love the concept of access-infused performance. How beautiful is that as a concept? We could just be infused by this. It's amazing. Sorry, I'll stop talking. Fayen, please. Are we shit at access?
I mean, I think that the examples, which I would refer people to again, of the playlist of the conversations that you've had before, they show that there are really wonderful, exciting examples across time of artists who are in institutions who have not been shit at access. But the problem is that in the contemporary moment, across the board, yes. And I think that this is an exciting opportunity for me to be in conversation with you, because I think that it's time that we really get to grips with what's going on here, because there are those of us who are doing the exciting work. We know how revolutionary it is. We know that it liberates people's thinking and perception, and so that you don't just have this narrow reading of what a cultural work is. And yet we're continually facing these institutions where we're struggling to compromise, to get our work in there, or just facing a lack of interest and a lack of imagination and ambition from people. We're facing situations where they compartmentalise access. And I want to call out tonight situations where even here, with Melbourne Fringe and the notion of access and inclusive design, I was supposed to talk at another panel tomorrow night, which is a Melbourne Fringe event about inclusive design, but I can't because they don't offer a video feed. They only offer in person. So here's an example where we are getting compartmentalised into the disability event has all these wonderful accommodations, but why is it not across the board?
Really interesting. Morwenna, you have a bit of a different perspective on this because in our briefing you talked about that maybe we're not globally shit at it, but maybe there's bits that are really excelling. And I wondered if you could talk to that.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I've just been doing this interesting project with UNESCO, actually, and kind of looking at disability inclusion and culture internationally. So I'd say that, often we feel the grass is greener and that everything's, better somewhere else. But having had a look at a range of different countries now, I think we're a bit shit, but we're certainly not as shit as perhaps some other places, to put it, not politely. But I also don't think it's the art's fault, and I think it's part of bigger issues around disability in Australia, and I think this is where this all comes from. I think, part of why we've gotten ourselves into this predicament are things like the social model is still not something that we actively particularly use here, particularly when we look at things like the NDIS and how medicalised a lot of conversation around disability is. I also think our laws here haven't done us any particular favours. They're not as strong as in some other places. And it was really interesting, to be in the UK earlier in the year working with Glastonbury in a place which has had stronger laws, but also laws aren't everything. And what really struck me about working with Glastonbury is they've been doing access since before the Equalities Act in the UK. So while I say the law might be part of the problem here, it's certainly not a kind of get out of jail free card. And I think when it comes to the arts, something perhaps that I think also maybe hasn't helped us here as much as perhaps in other places is that we haven't had particularly high expectations around this from some of our major funders. So when you look at the subsidised arts sector here, our funding bodies haven't mandated, haven't demanded, haven't even asked for a really long time about access. And when you think about kind of carrots and sticks, I'm a fan of a stick every now and again. because you kind of have to move forward if there's a stick behind you in a way. So, yeah, I think a bit shit, but I have hope because I'm an optimist and it could be worse. I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, well, somewhere in the middle. Wendy, I'm wondering, for you coming back to Australia, having had that experience in the UK, and you came in to be the director at Perth Festival, did you meet with resistance? Like, were you shocked at how, when you were wanting to bring someone amazing like Claire Cunningham into the country to show her work, was there resistance or questions about why are we doing this, or are you sure?
I remember when I first introduced the idea of I wanted to have an artist in residence each year, my 4-year tenure. And with each of those artists, I wanted them to show audiences and other artists other ways of thinking, of being an artist, of doing things. And for me, in the UK, Claire was one of the great artists and the great advocates. And when she was making a work, Claire Cunningham, for those who don't know, is an incredible Scottish performance maker who her life is lived on crutches. And when I was describing Claire and her art at meetings to funders and philanthropists, etc., people seemed uncertain that the idea of having a solo dancer who navigates the world with crutches, doing 2 performances across the course of the month and inviting other artists from across the country to do a workshop with her. I did get some raised eyebrows, but once Claire Cunningham landed on Australian soil, she took only minutes to change everybody's perceptions. And when we're talking about are we shit at access, Claire's show, the first show she presented, was called Guide Gods. And Guide Gods was a response to a British Council trip Claire took to Cambodia. And she was interviewing, because Cambodia has the highest number of people per capita living with disabilities. And Claire interviewed a Buddhist monk who was an amputee. He was a double amputee. And he looked at Claire. Claire was interviewing him, and he said, you know, this is, you and I, we're being punished for something we'd done wrong in a past life. And of course, this absolutely riled Claire, but it spurred on this wonderful piece of work that she created called Guide Gods. And Guide Gods was an exploration into the different religions. Claire's based in Glasgow, and she talked to people in her community from different religions to understand perspectives of disability. But one of the brilliant things she did in her art walk, she treaded care. She had cups of tea with people as she interviewed them about their perspectives. And as she performed this work, there was an audio description of what she was doing, but actually the audio description was like the voice of God seeing and listening to what Claire was doing it and describing it for the audience. So she did this work, and she did another work, and she led workshops. She was all over ABC TV, all over ABC radio, and she was a page 3 pin-up girl in a Murdoch-owned Western Australian newspaper. But when she was the last day of the festival, I took her out to lunch in North Perth to a wonderful cafe that's on the street, and I didn't get to talk to Claire, because she had so charmed the audiences, and even people who only saw her on TV or who only read about her wanted to talk to her. And that changed so many people's understanding and perception, and it set the tone for this fantastic 4-year journey of discovery into the world of disability arts in Western Australia.
Thanks, Wendy. We're somewhere in the middle. We're not completely shit, but we're not great. So we've got things to do. Fayen, you've already mentioned some of the things that there's been 3 conversations prior to this one. And how many people, I'm just going to ask for a show of hands, has anyone watched or engaged with any of the conversations, the 3 in advance of this coming tonight? Yep, there's a couple of people. Brilliant. If you haven't, I encourage you to go and have a look at them, have an engage with them. I'm wondering for our 3 panellists whether there were things in those conversations that really stood out to you, whether they were things that affirmed you, whether they were things that surprised you, shifted or strengthened your thinking. Morwenna, I wonder if you want to start this one off.
Thank you. You had such a great lineup for those conversations. Like, what an amazing bunch of people. You know, some familiar and some not familiar to me. So it's always good to hear from a wide variety of people. The one that kind of stuck in my memory was the conversation around feedback with Michelle and Bree and Jo Verrant. And it also made me, it was sort of talking about, you know, how and when and why do we give disabled artists feedback. And obviously feedback's really important in terms of helping us improve and make better work. And it made me think about a couple of things. One is, I think, maybe one of the challenges that we have here in Australia is that it can be really difficult to see each other's work. We're such a big country and we don't always get an opportunity to see the work of other disabled artists that often. We don't, you know, we've got great things happening like Alter State and Undercover Artists Festival, but other than that, you know, I remember coming to my first Unlimited with Wendy and Caroline in 2014, and I could see more work by disabled artists in a week than I reckon I could see in a year in Australia, just because of the tyranny of distance. And so that's interesting. And I think in terms of how we get better, I think seeing each other's work is a part of that process. But it also made me think about feedback from others. And there was this ridiculous review from Opera Queensland's La Boheme maybe a week or 2 ago. I don't know if anyone saw it, but they got a 1-star review because the reviewers basically got fixated on the fact that there was an Auslan interpreter on the stage, and they couldn't understand why there would be an Auslan interpreter at the opera. And I just thought, gosh, you know, that's still a thing here. And how do any of us get decent critique and criticism when even our reviewers aren't educated? And, you know, I gave that reviewer 0 stars, of course. But it just highlighted to me how difficult actually it is to get feedback in lots of ways, and particularly, you know, critique and criticism from mainstream reviewer types. So that is interesting, and I think we've known for a while there's a piece of work to do there, but I think I was kind of shocked that in 2025 that happened. Still, I kind of thought we were past that, but no. But I think that conversation around feedback is a really important one to keep having, and we'll continue to have for a while yet.
Thanks, Morwenna. Fayen?
Carolyn, is it possible for you to read out a couple of quotes that we had from Robert Gale from those sessions? Because I would love to respond to those.
Yes, it would be my pleasure. Robert Softly Gale, who is the artistic director of Birds of Paradise, which is a disability-led theatre company based in Glasgow, said, "If you've got a budget line for catering, but you haven't got a budget line for access, then you're saying that food is more important than disabled people. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. And whether it's what you mean to say, maybe it's not, but that is what you're saying." He goes on to say, "I can't think of any other group where we said, you can't come because you cost too much. Any other group in society. If we think that women can't come, it costs too much to have them there, or black people can't come because it costs too much. Like, that would be outrageous. We just wouldn't. We wouldn't accept that, and we should never. So why is the finance argument okay when it comes to disabled people? We're in a world where there's plenty of money, you know. There's not a lack of resource in this world. So it's about where you put it, you know.
Thanks, Carolyn, for reading that, because when I was listening to those talks, which was so fantastic, it struck me that this is the crucial issue, and that is the extent to which our contemporary system, the arts institutions, the attitudes that we encounter in reviewers and other people are built on colonial eugenics logics and inherited colonial structures and protocols around whose bodies are economically valuable. And I've done some extensive research into, particularly within Victoria, the beginnings of the institutional landscape here, and particularly the cultural institutions. And one of the things that happened here was that in the colony of Victoria, you had this network of public organisations that they deliberately established to foster what they called an informed citizenry. So things like the National Library, the National Gallery, the library, the museum, they had an industrial and technological museum, there was the Botanic Gardens and the Zoological Gardens. And they actually called this the institution. And the institution was legislated as mutually reinforcing tools of civic culture. And what they wanted was to develop what they called a self-managing and self-directed public who would absorb codes of behaviour and ideals of aesthetic and technical excellence, and who would devote their leisure time to self-education so that they could contribute to the settler colony's cultural and economic development. And it was considered that Melbourne was the most successful example of this in any of the colonies, of a citizenry who would go out and self-educate themselves about these codes of behaviour. But these concepts of the ideal citizen, of the productive citizen, were enmeshed with this logic of eugenics. And disabled people and other marginalised people were sidelined off into places like I live, in the lunatic asylums and other asylums. And we were not considered to be acceptable bodies to either educate or entertain. And so the problem is that our contemporary culture sometimes realises and sometimes does not realise the extent to which they are continuing and proliferating these codes of behaviour. And we see this because we've got these big institutions that are still made for an ideal body. So either they're not accessible to us, or people haven't retrofitted them. But also you've got ingrained codes of behaviour that say, yes, it's too expensive to do access, or we'll do access for this show because it's about disability, but I'm not going to do it across all of the programming. Or we'll do access one touch tour on a 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon when I can't go because my son's got basketball. But when I don't go to that one, I don't get the audio description or the touch tour in the entire exhibition season of a major exhibition that includes a blind performer. So over and over again, apparently radical, experimental, apparently top of the line cultural institutions are reinscribing these eugenics logics, and we have to understand that, and we have to transform it. And I took great inspiration from Aboriginal leaders at the sovereignty protest who said everyone is welcome. So the problem at the moment with our cultural institutions is that not everyone is welcome. White, able-bodied people who speak English are welcome, and sometimes we'll do things for some other people. And so until we can transform that, we actually cannot move on from access being partial, compartmentalised, and something that you do when you've got enough money.
Thanks, Fayen. You're allowed to clap. I'll let it. Can you hear clapping? There's clapping, Fayen, for what you've just said. Wendy, I don't know if you want to add anything, if there was something in the...
There's two things that come to mind, listening to thank you, Fayen, for that absolutely passionate and fantastically articulate framework that you've just given us. Something struck me when Morwenna was talking. And I wonder if that person who wrote that review had considered that for years and years and years, every opera that she had gone to see that was performed in Italian or French or German was translated into English so that she could understand that. And I think it would be a very nice thing if somebody pointed that out to that. You might want to write to her, Morwenna, and point that out. I mean, this is just thoughtless, right? Not understanding her own context. But I mean, what Fayen has said about institutions, I suppose I just want to give the example of South Bank Centre, that when South Bank Centre was invited to put this festival on, South Bank Centre is a brutalist, concrete, 21-acre site on the Thames that was built before accessibility was, people were still living with a medical model of disability. And so for South Bank Centre to be able to host this incredible festival, it had to take a long, hard, deep look inside. Every single doorway to every bathroom, every single door to every venue, every cafe in that building had to be reassessed. The whole staff had to undergo training. So when the Olympics and the Paralympics were on, there were welcome teams all over London. And as a result of what we learned, this learning transformed to the welcome teams across the city, which was, the South Bank Centre sits between Waterloo Station and the West End and Charing Cross. And people who cross that site get lost. And hosts at the South Bank Centre would be used to saying to people, oh, you're looking for the Queen Elizabeth Hall, and they would point, it's over there. But what all of us had to learn is that you had to say, actually, and maybe I'm even getting this wrong, I don't know, but the Queen Elizabeth Hall is about 50 metres to your right, and there's a doorway that you need to go through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole series of understandings. The website had to be completely overhauled. The programs that we used, the whole site had to be made. We did the best job that we could in the time, but the organisation and the Arts Council of England committed to that investment, because how embarrassing would it have been to invite the world in, but not really to enable the world to walk through those doors. So it was an incredible example of taking this responsibility as an organisation really seriously. But of course, the conversations were all led by people with lived experience of a disability. It wasn't for the organisation to scratch their heads and work it out. It was to invite the people who had the lived experience to tell us what we needed to do to make this festival genuinely welcoming.
And the great thing was they were paid to do that. It wasn't just, can you come and tell us what you reckon? It was like, we'll pay you to come and join the conversation, which is crucial. I just want to tell a slight aside about being in London when the Olympics and the Paralympics were on. I was on a bus somewhere in London, and this little kid was eyeing me up. And at one point, they just kind of leant to their mum and said, can I ask them a question? She was like, sure. And so this little kid just went, what sport do you play? And I just went, I'm really sorry, I'm just an artist. And they went, oh, okay, and went away. I wasn't quite good enough that day. I think we've talked about so many things. We've talked about the baked-in-ness of ableism. We've talked about how some laws attempt to address that and have addressed that in other parts of the world, but it's still not perfect. We know that in this country, our DDA has just undergone or is undergoing a review, so it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of that and if it comes back with any more teeth than it currently has. We can all keep our fingers crossed about that one. I have a million other quotes from people from those conversations, but I won't go into them because I think there's something about I want to just ask the three of you. I recently had the privilege of having a conversation with the beautiful Dan Dorr, who some of you all know. And in that, he shared with me a quote that everything could be different. And my beautiful partner Laura made me badges of that, so I wear them proudly in the world to go, it doesn't have to be like this, you know. Everything could be different. So what do the three of you think we need to do, or what needs to change in our artistic landscape for us to be able to embed access as a natural, expected part of artistic practice in Australia? There'll just be a few things, I'm sure. But what does that make you think about? And how, Fayen, when it's baked in so firmly to literally the bricks and mortar, what do we do?
Well, let me start there then, because luckily, as frustrated as I get, I'm also equally absolutely excited about the possibilities. Firstly, sometimes organisations come to me and they want me to write image descriptions for all of these artworks, and I say, you could just pay me $500. I'll teach your staff to write the image descriptions. We'll do it in a way where they'll really love this writing practice, and then on an ongoing basis, you don't need to get consultants in. And so I've been thinking about that a lot since I pitched that, and I was thinking about the ways that you can actually embed access into organisations in a way that people are going to get to love it, in the ways that we get to experience that. So imagine that you could introduce these like 3 or 6 week blocks, 30 minutes in the morning, and it's effectively also like a bringing together time, a grounding time. So like from say 9 to 9:30 in the morning, gallery staff would come together and experiment with a different kind of image description practice. And this could be a meditative, kind of approach, or they could be learning how to co-author, co-write. They could be describing imagery that's important to the nature or the mission of that place. For a theatre, they could be describing together the imagery that's being used to profile an upcoming work, like what's important about this. And so I think, and similarly, you could have a 6-week block where each morning for an hour, people learn basic Auslan, so that, and then you flip out to something else and then you come back to the next layer of Auslan. So then Auslan is not just about having a sign interpreter on the stage at a specific event, but it becomes part of our casual and playful conversations. And I do want to shout out right now Arts House. I'm currently on the warehouse residency at Arts House, and they, together with also Creative Australia, have resourced me to gather together this incredible group of disability-led artists, writers, architects, sound artists from around the world to just really experiment with what it can be to have a blind architect developing a tactile stage, to have spatialized captioning that's performative, to to have all kinds of methods and practices. So we do need resourcing to be able to dream big and play, and to be able to invite others in. And because we are resourced, to be able to be generous in sharing our methods with others from within and outside the access community. So people get to see that this is not just some boring compliance, but it's actually interesting and joyful and playful.
Yeah. We're going to come back to that, Fayen, because I want to know, how do we implement that broadly? Other thoughts on how do we change it? How do we change the landscape? Wendy?
Caroline?
Hello.
Sorry, but I want to turn this on you for a second.
Ooh.
Because one of the most magnificent and joyous experiences that I have ever had in a theatre was the project that you worked on with the British Para Orchestra, and I think there were 6 or 8 dancers, called The Nature of Why. And if you want to, sorry to take over here, but if you want to just explain the work, but I'd love to hear, it was so accessible and it was just built into every moment in the theatre. And I wonder if you could just tell people a little bit about that work and how your process began to make that work the joyous thing it was for everybody, and the leveling that it did for everybody, that it gave everybody.
Sure. So in 2018, I came back to Australia to take up the job at Arts Access. But before I could leave the UK, I was commissioned to make this work as co-director and choreographer with British Para Orchestra, called The Nature of Why. And it was composed by, we're working with Will Gregory, who is part of Goldfrapp. I was working with 10 musicians, 4 dancers. Everywhere we took the work, we would inherit a string ensemble who would join us while we were there. Every performance had sign language interpretation, live audio description, and captioning. And there were no seats, so it was, you need to imagine lots of musicians, lots of musical instruments, including things like marimba and a whole percussion section and all these things on stage, as well as 200 audience members. No seats. There are a few seats around for people that needed them. But I wanted, every performance was obviously relaxed because people were encouraged to move around. And the dancers and the musicians moved in and around people. And it became this completely immersive thing that we had no idea if it was going to work. I arrived to a group of musicians that were sitting in a U shape like orchestras do, and kind of went, great, I need to make them dance, great, it's going to be great. 4 dancers who also played instruments throughout the show at various points. But it just became this incredible magic that just happened. And yeah, it just was a lovely thing. And I would say that the reason that we honestly didn't know if it was going to work until we had an audience in. So we didn't really know until the opening night, which was terrifying. But luckily for me, people came on the journey with us, and it did work. Carly didn't know that I had necessarily made that, but when we were having a conversation one day about what's the most accessible piece of work you've ever seen, she said, I saw this amazing thing at Perth Festival called some orchestra, and I just went, that's nice. That's really lovely. I think that the reason that it worked was because I just asked the question. So I worked with audio describers in the room while I was making the work. So they knew the language I was using. They knew how I was describing types of movement. So they were able to also weave that in. We tried different versions of audio description and decided that actually the description that worked best were words, but very poetic words, rather than we were trying another type which was about sound, but because there was already so much sound. All the musicians led the touch tour, so I witnessed this beautiful moment with one of the blind musicians talking to a blind audience member who kind of, before he started his description, just went, do colours mean things to you? Do you want me to talk about light? What do you actually need from me, or what's useful for me to say? And I was just like, that is incredibly nuanced and a beautiful thing. So that's one of the proudest moments of making that work, and we did bring it to Perth Festival, and it was amazing. But we also took it was at Unlimited, and Wendy saw it and immediately afterwards said, I need that in Perth. And I just went, okay, talk to Jonathan. He's the producer. I wasn't doing anything with it. But yeah, it was a very exciting and beautiful thing to have made. And we're about to remount it in Hong Kong. So next March it's going to Hong Kong. Is that enough, Wendy? Martin?
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot like that. And I just want to add one more thing, was that we were all smushed on that stage together, and everybody, there was a sense of care that everybody became mindful of everybody else in the way they moved and the way, there was just wonderful sense of care that I'd rarely experienced in a theatre.
It was
Beautiful.
fun. And I think the thing that I love about it is that when people say, you can't have all that access all at the same time, and it's kind of like, really? Actually, I don't believe that. I have evidence that tells me otherwise. Shall I show you how you can do it? And I think that's what Fayen's so good at doing too, is just kind of going, oh yeah, you can, and it can be really interesting and really great. It's possible. You just have to put the effort in and want to do it. And you have to have a budget line. Imagine that. Crazy. Fayen.
Yeah, was reading this afternoon some writing by Umberto Eco, it's like from 1989, about the poetics of the open work. And he was talking about visual art, but he described a viewer who can choose their own points of view, connections and directions, and who can detect behind each individual configuration other possible forms that coexist, who's excited by the new freedom of the work, by its infinite potential for proliferation and exchange rich in unforeseeable discoveries. And when you're just describing your work just then, I was thinking, that just reminds me of that so much, the ways that access can dramatically liberate the abundance of ways that somebody, anybody, all of us might experience the work differently, but we can be in conversation about those differences in the ways that we experience the work. I think that your question is how do we actually, get these kinds of change? And I guess we have to be smart about what are the lever points. And, to continue this kind of goal that I had today of actually being, to go with what you said with the provocation and being honest and speaking out, is that, Morwenna and I were recently involved in a funding body who had invited disabled artists to be part of something. I went, at great kind of home expense, with my single mother, my son, and went up to this event. Not a single presenter knew anything about image description. And so I said after the event that was a failing of the organisation, major national funding organisation, that they would invite disabled artists in, they would know they had a number of blind artists coming in and not a single presenter had image description. And I said, you should make it one of the requirements of you actually hiring your consultants and your presenters, that they need to identify what their methodology and approaches in relation to a number of access points. And they said back to me, we can't do that because there aren't enough people who have experience in this. And I think that is the major failing, because until you say, no, it is that important, then these places will go out and they will fund people like us to come in and show them that it's exciting and possible and not scary. And actually you can do image description and it's not just some big expense. So I think we have to look with each situation and go, why is it not happening? What are the excuses? And where can we shift the requirements so that actually people start to take this, as something that is a part of their work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to Morwenna's point about the carrot and the stick. And maybe that's the stick that we need to be wielding. Morwenna, did you want to add anything in?
Yeah, very pro stick over here. Absolutely, love a stick, and I think we shouldn't be afraid to use a stick more in this country. Absolutely, and just as an example, to get national portfolio organisation multi-year funding in the UK, you have to submit an equality, diversity, and inclusion plan to get that funding. Now, look, there's a lot of things in the EDI bucket. They aren't all access, of course, but that's something. And we just don't have very high expectations from our funding bodies at the moment. So that's one thing. But I really love the point from Fayen and Wendy about fun and joy and how important that is. But I would add into the mix as well something that I think we should talk about more, which is the business case for access. And I think there's so many things on the to-do list, particularly for small to medium arts organisations. There's a never-ending list of things to do. There's, very much limited budgets, etc. And I think access isn't going to get to the top of the pile unless we kind of talk about the economic potential of providing access as well. And in the UK, they do a good job of measuring things like the purple pound, which is the spending power of disabled households in the UK, which is something like £2.5 billion annually. And I think that what that does is it helps break that kind of perception that disabled people don't have money to buy tickets to go and see your shows. Yes, we know that there's a big crossover with disability and lower socioeconomic access, of course, but there is also, I believe, a really strong business case from an economic standpoint for access as well. And I wish that was something that we talked about more. One of the other actions that we need to take is just invest more in more high quality work, and the funding program that Wendy's running now I'm really excited about, because it is about kind of big investment in major work, because I think maybe something we haven't touched on yet is just this perception that's always kind of lurking about our sector of the quality not being there, which of course we all know is not true. But when I think back to, I think I've been going to Unlimited for 10 years now. And in 10 years, I think I've seen 2 Australian programmers there. One of them is on this call, and that's not okay. That is the place to go and see, the top echelon of deaf and disabled work. And for whatever reason, our programmers aren't seeing it as important to be there and see that work. And I think that's also, one action I would take is just to send them all there, or to many of the other international festivals that program this work well, because I think we've got to do the business case thing, but we've also got to tackle this perception of lower quality, front on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always describe Unlimited as disabled artists on a silver platter. There we are. There's no shortage of disabled artists producing amazing work at Unlimited. But I also think there's ones closer to home. So, for example, No Limits in Hong Kong. Also, if people can't make it all the way to London, it's direct flight to Hong Kong. And that festival also runs every 2 years. So there's really exciting things happening in Asia. Really exciting things happening.
Carolyn, what about this for an idea then? How about somebody out there fund us to, develop some accessible case studies that are produced in really exciting ways of historic works that have been fantastic, contemporary artists who are doing great work within Australia. I'm happy to go to Asia with you. Let's go to Asia, and then we find ways of really getting these stories out in exciting ways. This is not buried in some report, but we're putting them out there. We have some sort of, various YouTube channels, social media, whatever, but we are getting the methods, and we're not just getting, here's this amazing show, but we're drilling into how did they actually do it, and how could you do it? How could it be translated or interpreted at different budget levels for different kinds of audiences? So, if we're here and we're going to actually make some change, here's a pitch.
I think it's great. Absolutely. Come to Hong Kong with us. That would be amazing. I think it is the moment to get to solutions and what do we do next before we get to questions. So I hope you've got your questions brewing. I'm going to encourage you to chat to the person next to you to come up with some in a little minute. But what are the kind of ideas, things that we could do? And you have no shortage of them, which is delicious. But are there other things that we could be doing? Initially I'd had this thought about if we could start again, but it's not about that. It's about how do we move from where we are now to where we want to get to. And I just want you to conjure a thought with me. When I asked myself and other friends of mine, I've asked this question of, if you can imagine radical access, what does that look like? Or what is that for you? And actually, I think it might have been Robert that said, I would want to be able to just buy a ticket and turn up and not have to make another phone call, not have to go to a special bit of the website, not have to search for the access information, for anyone to know that I could turn up and every performance would be audio described, and I could just wander through and pick up a headset, and not have to pre-warn anyone of my presence. Wouldn't that be amazing if we didn't have to send out the bells and whistles before we got there?
Yes.
It's like, watch out, disabled person coming! Ah! Like, just to be able to go would be amazing. But what are the other things? What could we be doing?
Can I offer one more suggestion, and then I will be quiet? But it just came to me because I was thinking again about what Wendy said about the festival and the issues of the brutalist building, etc., etc. And I thought, well, you know how we've had that M pavilion, we've had the pavilion. What about if there was every year, I'm working, for example, with a blind architect, Poppy Levinson, at the moment on this, this tactile stage. But what about if every year there is a disabled architect and performers paired up to create some sort of staging pavilion that is actually programmed with exciting performance by that are access-led and access-infused. So some performers who are not disabled but actually are excited about infusing access. It becomes this thing that people are excited about. It happens every summer in these temporary structures so we can make them accessible and we're not stuck with retrofitting.
That would be amazing. Let's do that.
I think you need to propose that, Fayen, for the in the Serpentine in London. Every year they have a different
let's
building.
do that.
That's all eyes are on that from all over the world. So we propose, Caroline, could you organise Fayen and did you say Poppy? Yeah.
I think it's what other ideas? Why don't we just get all of these ideas out there and see where they might land or fly?
I'm very grateful that this conversation's being recorded, because I'm going to need to go back and write them all down and work out where they all go. Morwenna, you've done vast research and are engaging with 1 million organisations. What do you think are the major opportunities that people are constantly missing, or that we could conjure?
So many, aren't there? And God, what Robert said, like, isn't it wild that that's radical? And that feels so radical to me right now because it feels so far away from where we are. But when you say it, it's just so ordinary, and I guess that's the whole thing of this radical access conversation, isn't it, really? But I think the biggest change happens when there's more of us, metaphorically, physically, whatever, in the building, in organisations, in positions of power, in decision-making roles. And there's, we do have a lot of research out there, and there's a lot of research to get depressed about. My favourite piece of research to get depressed about, I think, is that it's something like only 3% of cultural leaders are disabled. And that's, that feels to me like a real opportunity. And Caroline can't be on every board. She is trying, but there are many of us. And so I really think
enough already.
Infiltrating organisations and more of us, I think that's where change will happen, because we have to be in the building, as it were, to kind of help make that change happen. And I worked at what was then the Australia Council for years and years, and it took like 10 years, but it was just me banging on the door for years and years and years to get things like that dedicated funding program happening. And while it's, it's got pluses and minuses, it's more money for disabled artists, but I think just more of us infiltrating.
But do you think, Morwenna, the problem with that is that we get expected to spend all this time advocating to just make the work that we wish we were making in the first place, and less time? So on top of that, and not denying that would be great, but it would also be great to have more allies who are out there doing that work, so that actually we don't need to be in those positions, because we can just actually make the work ourselves.
Absolutely. Love an ally to Fayen, of course. And I think more of us all round. But I think from what I've seen, I think that's where change happens. I think it's when people are face to face with disabled people, when they have to listen to us. So yeah, all of the above, I reckon.
I think artists in the UK, I mean, one of the things that I learned was the role that artists play in showing governments that that they could not navigate the world. So you had people who were wheelchair users who couldn't get on a bus to navigate the cities that they live in. And eventually the kind of public demonstration on the streets or the inability to enter a building, through artists doing interventions in public spaces, it became really clear that something had to be done. So I think the artist's voice in all of this is really important, not just the people leading organizations, but the work that artists is making that can show us the change that needs to be made. Fayen, when we talked last night, the work that Jenny Seeley and Robert were talking about, Wendy Hoos, it would be fantastic to get a library together of works that have magnificent access embedded into them. And for people just to see that work, a kind of library for people to access, to understand how great art can be made using accessibility as a tool of artistic expression.
I mean, that would be the dream of the Access Urban Library, is that we can do that thing. But at the moment, the majority of the time is volunteered and squeezed in between, earning money here and trying to do art projects here. But that is the plan and the dream. And that's why, again, but it comes back to resourcing. So keep putting these ideas out there.
Yeah.
So if people will resource us to do this work, we are committed to sharing these examples. I mean, to getting them out there. I think that would be so exciting to feel the energy around that. You could then also bring it in across kind of education, formal and non-formal levels, both within dedicated arts programs and kind of within mainstream areas. There's so much that you could do. And if there's a way that we can just not do this library as kind of like this volunteer effort, but actually be developing some really rich and exciting case studies, I think that would go a really long way. I do have to bring this back to something else, though, and it reminds me, because Wendy, you talked about, I think it was Cambodia and the disability and the percentage of disability. And I think we also, I feel like I need to say that we are in this time in history. We have the genocide in Gaza, which I suspect is now taken over from Cambodia in terms of the greatest proportion of disabled. We have many other situations of violence around the world. And we have COVID, of course, which hasn't gone away. So there are these mass disabling events going on. And it means that it's even more imperative that we don't allow there to be a smaller and smaller pool of these able-bodied people who are accessing and getting all of this funding for these very discrete institutions. And instead we can be really, and not just ambitious, but we can be really serious and committed about expanding access to art making and the arts for the majority of us who are actually in these situations of either being disabled or having a disabled, family member, or being future disabled. So I think we need to do this as an imperative within society culturally. And as a result, we have to be careful not to silo disability away from other kinds of concerns like language groups, cultural groups, and others who are being marginalised, because usually, of course, there is this intersectional cross-marginalisation that's happening. So it's just a clarion call for there to be more access, and not just on the programs that are labelled radical access.
Yeah, amazing. Morwenna, you've got your hand up, I can see.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, the conversation about things like case studies, and just to bring, maybe to finish on some optimism before we move to questions. But a couple of things I'm kind of excited about or hopeful about around this particular moment in time in Australia. Obviously, we've got this equity, arts and disability associated plan. The first time we've had a plan like this with actual money attached, 8.1 million would have been lovely to see another 0 in the end, but like it's awesome. And I think on the case study thing, just to let everyone know, one of the things that is the kind of one of the first deliverables coming out of that plan will be this new national code of practice around accessibility for the arts, screen and games sector. And that's not just for disabled artists and arts organisations, that's for all artists and arts organisations. And we don't quite know what it's going to look like yet exactly, but essentially, hopefully it will set some minimum national standards for us in this field, which I'm really excited about, particularly if there's a few sticks flying about that might help people, you know, sign up to it and get into it. And of course, you know, I was in Brisbane last week, and you can't go to Brisbane without talking about the Olympics right now. And when I think about what that did for the UK, I'm really excited about what 2032 might do for us here, if all the right ingredients kind of line up to make that happen. But that could be an incredible opportunity for us too, hopefully with some real investment behind us. So they're two things I think I'm excited about that might kind of lead us into action in the future as well.
Yeah, I too am excited about the Olympics because I have seen, felt, witnessed what it did in the UK, and I think if it can do, I think if it can do anything like that here, that would be amazing. Amazing. Okay, we are going to turn the camera and the microphones towards the audience, the fabulous audience. I would like you to just turn to the person sitting next to you and potentially just have a quick chat to them about questions that you might have, anything that might be resonating, things that you want to extend, things that are firing your embers, all of those things. So we're just going to take 2 minutes to do that. So chat to the person next to you. Great. I'm going to bring you all back. This is the hardest bit. It's like I open a can of worms and then let you all squirm around the room for a little minute. Sorry. That's a terrible description. You're not worms, I promise. The lovely Simon is going to be the runner with a microphone in the room. Oh, and Tom. Brilliant. So we've got 2 microphone runners. Please wait for the microphone to come to you before you share your question. Otherwise, my lovely colleagues online won't be able to hear your question, and I'll make it easier for everybody in the room. So, can I please have questions, thoughts, embers that are firing, ideas that might have emerged? Samsara, front row. Sorry, I'm always... Oh, yeah, and please say your name, even though, because I won't know everyone in the room. So please say your name before you start your question.
Hi, I'm Samsara. I'm always the icebreaker, sorry.
Never apologise for that. It's very important.
I was just talking to Lauren here. The thing, I feel like a lot of the conversation around access is about audience, and it is, and I understand that that's hugely important. I'm just wondering about what's the economic argument for the artists, to accessibility for the artists and spaces that the artists can access for whatever reason, because how do we get to unlimited if we have nowhere where we can practice and develop our skills, for example?
It's a great question. And thoughts, lovely panellists?
Yes, it's a great question, because we obviously need all kinds of pipelines into those kinds of festivals. So we need these kinds of actions at all kinds of levels, including in community arts centres, in education, in young people's theatres and centres, in studios. We Are Studios, I've been in exchange with lately, who are doing fantastic things in Western Sydney in terms of disability-led studios. So I think it's just a major endorsement for the proposal that actually we do need to continue to support the existing initiatives and expand more to have these pipelines through to these kinds of like higher level stages.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Carly Finlay, down on the beanbag.
Thank you. Peter and I were saying that we find that the onus is often on the disabled person to do all the work around accessibility. And when are the allies going to step up? Because I think disabled people do most work around accessibility, which takes away from making the work. And that's not just in my work at Fringe, but also in my work in the writing sector and Peter's work in podcasting. And I would say lots of disabled people here and online would think that too. So how do we bring the allies along? How do we ask them to step up?
Great question. And I think it goes, Fayen's genius idea about us going in for half an hour a day and then saying, I'm going to teach you how to do this, you can do it, is a really great one. Because I think I've for a few years now struggled with that thought about the concept of nothing about us without us. So how do we do that but also pass it on so we're not the ones having to do it? Like, I think it's if anyone's got a solution to that, please let me know. But panellists, do you have thoughts about this?
I think, Caroline, what's that expression you use about buzzing in the ears? You're always buzzing in the ears of people saying we need this, we must, telling people what you need and having them understand the absolute necessity. And Carly, I think it's as boring as that, having to repeat yourself, because somebody without the lived experience can be an ally, can be empathetic, but unless they're constantly reminded of how vital this is, it's not going to happen. What's your expression, Caroline? I love it.
I used to get described as a mosquito buzzing in the ear of the arts industry.
I didn't want to refer to you as a mosquito. That's what I wanted you to
I'm
say.
very happy. Stella Young used to call herself an agitator, like a washing machine. And so I just call myself an irritant.
That is, like Carly says, it is really exhausting. Like, there's been a number of times I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm just too tired. It's too much fighting. I wish I could just make the artwork and not have to create the conditions to show the artwork that I want to make. And so another idea I'd like to put out there is, how about we have more funded residencies for people like us who are putting in the hard yards, where we don't actually have to even make any work. Perhaps some sort of lovely retreat or hotel where we just actually get to rest and recover and, get our energies back so we can get out there again. And if we could build and fold these into our year, that actually I do get to go. Now I get to go and have my week or weekend at this place, and I don't have to do anything. I just need to recover and recenter. Then I think we would have the energy to do more. But it's just, we are just expected over and over every single day to keep putting. It's not just about unpaid labour, because we do that all the time, but it's just the fight. And I advocate if you've got hoteliers in the audience. I would love some sort of 5-star retreat. I would go for that, especially if I don't have to cook dinner every night. And then that will enable people like us to just keep going.
I don't know how many of you know the artist, the beautiful artist Jess Tom, who did a whole festival about the Festival of Rest and Resistance, and how rest is resistance, but it also is absolutely critical. And yeah, thank you. Peter.
Hello everyone, my name's Peter Hook. I'm the host of the I Can't Stand podcast, and I'm very invested in disabled culture in particular. Even sitting here as a woman with cerebral palsy, I feel very behind in understanding what's happened before. And I would really wish there was a resource that we could, put all together to say this is what amazing disabled people have produced in the past. Because I think until there is that resource, particularly non-disabled people won't understand how amazing we are and how undervalued we are as a community.
Thanks, Peter. Can I give you a bit of shining hope?
Please do.
So next week, on Wednesday, there is going to be the launch of a national archive of disability arts in Australia. So it's capturing 40 years of our history.
You solved my question very quickly. Thank you.
Who did it? So it was a collaboration. It's been happening for years. So it was Arts Access, so lots of the disability arts organisations, but it was funded by the Australian Research, but headed up by QUT, so Queensland Uni, and the brilliant Bree Hadley has been the major researcher, principal researcher. So yeah, there you go.
Where do we find it?
Let me get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
I will make sure that there's a link in the comments under this on the YouTube.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other question? I'm really glad I had to answer to that one. I could go, it's okay, we've done it. It won't be exhaustive, but there's something at least. Hello, another hand in the audience.
Hello.
Hello, please tell us your name.
Is that on? Yeah. Oh, hello. I'm Suzanne. I work at Performing Lines. Especially as we look forward to the Brisbane Olympics, what can we learn from London and to ensure that the change that we make for those big events when they come to town is actually sustained?
I've got some thoughts on this, but panellists' thoughts on this? Wendy?
Yeah. So one of the visionary things that happened, when a city bids for the Olympic Games, they also need to present a cultural Olympiad. And one of the things that was at the centre of London's bid for the Olympic Games was unlimited. And the arts councils across the UK, so Scotland, Wales, England, mostly from England, but invested in the 4 years leading up to the Olympics. It was £9 million, which was a hell of a lot of money. And the invitation to artists was dream your biggest dream. And great ideas were funded and supported at every level to do these things that we've been talking about today. So it would be really interesting with the Games coming up in Queensland to see what commitment the Queensland government is making to disability artists with disabilities, I should say.
They have got an arts and disability strategy they've just put out. It's got some money, but not a lot of money attached to it. But there's still time. There's still time.
There's still time. We're hopeful.
I mean, it was transformational in London. For example, the media got behind it. Channel 4 made documentary series so that people could meet the artists and just members of the community who are people who are living with disability, and they became the hero. The heroes. When Unlimited was on, the artists became heroes in the community. And what was fantastic about the program is it happened inside venues, but it happened outdoors, so that people who were stumbling, walking along the Thames would stumble across fantastic art. Caroline herself made this wonderful work, Leaving Limbo Landing, and it was performed outdoors. Grey Eye, incredible outdoor performances on the streets, in the park, so that people didn't have to go inside tiny little doors in big, intimidating venues to experience the wonderful art that was being made.
Yeah, it was amazing. We have time for one last question. Exciting. Please tell us your name.
Hello, my name is En Hui. I'm an immigrant and I came to Australia when I was nearly 13 and I didn't know how to speak English before I came here. And I really struggled to engage with the arts before I became fluent in English. I feel like artists love a good yap. Like, we love talking about our feelings, but it's just so kind of inaccessible when someone doesn't speak the language very fluently to be able to articulate what they think. And it's also, like, even going to the theatre sometimes as well, like, every theatre kind of has a different protocol, and if you're not confident in speaking English, you don't really feel confident kind of reaching out to the front house staff to ask questions about the venue and the procedure and everything. And I don't really have a solution for that problem, and I'm wondering if you guys might have some insight into that.
Fayen.
I faced this issue with some of my very talented graphic design, communication design students who just struggled to go to art galleries because of the language barrier. And these were students who were Chinese as a first language. And so I assisted to catalyse them to form the Chinese Art Club, and brought them together with curators and the then director of ACCA, the Australian Centre for Contemporary Art, and they would spend time developing Chinese language art tours and really just cultivating relationships between the curatorial leaders of these institutions and the Chinese community who were interested, and then they moved on from there. I think they did something at the Melbourne Art Fair and other places. But I think that this is another really crucial thing in our city, especially with all of the conflicts over migrants and immigration. It is a problem if almost everything is in English, and we are not providing the ways that people can understand the concepts and the richness that underlies the work that they might go to see. So I don't know if you're interested, but they're on Instagram. They have really amazing branding and marketing, but they also might be a place to think about, can you do that, use that kind of model across other cultural venues? And it's not saying that you're segregating just in Chinese, but it's providing a link of conversation so that you can engage in these artworks, if you're somebody who's coming from the arts anyway, in a way that is really rich, and you're not kind of like afraid of even asking for things to be kind of translated or for conversation to happen.
Thanks, Fayen. Just on that point about language, one of the conversations involves Ben Evans from a project called Europe Beyond Access, and every one of their events is translated into at least 6 languages. So it's something, we are so bad at it here, but it's all possible. We just don't do it because we don't.
And you could do it if you did multi-channel audio description that was more like FM radio.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
yes, anybody interested in that? That's another thing that we're exploring. Please come on board.
Amazing. We managed to make it through 90 minutes, team. Well done, you. Amazing. I just want to say a huge thank you to my incredibly talented and generous panelists for sharing your wisdom and ideas and insights with us. So please can we thank the panellists. I also want to thank our brilliant Auslan interpreters, our captioners, and the very crucial people behind the scenes that have made tonight happen. I've got a list. I want to thank Millie and Ollie and Carly and the team of volunteers from Fringe. Thank you also to Simon, Abrahams, Kate, Sulan, and all the previous Access panellists in our digital conversations. Robert suggests that he might be tuning in, so Robert, if you're out there, we love you. Thank you also to Simon, Anna, Tom and Cynthia here at Arts Centre Melbourne for making this happen. To Tim and Kale and Luke and Sam, who are our technicians that have made all the magic happen. We couldn't have done it without you, so thank you so much. And a huge thank you to all of you who have come into this amazing space with us and shared this conversation. We hope it was rich and fulfilling and has left you with more fire in your bellies, and long may it continue. And we'll just now gather all of Fayen's great ideas, all the ideas, and put them in a very large document and try and get them funded. That will be amazing. Thank you all. Safe journeys home. Go gently with yourselves. Thanks, lovely panellists. See you later.
Thank you. Such a privilege.
Oof. Thank you. We did it. Oh, whoops. Take this off.